So today's video is a sequel to one of the videos I first did when I restarted this channel back 7 months ago, which spoke about using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K with the Weebill S. And I'm happy to announce that Zhiyun has actually updated their Weebill S to fully be able to control the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and 6K over its USB-C protocol without using any external accessories. More on that after this. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Geoff. I'm a filmmaker and director of photography based in South Florida, and this is a place where I post some of my work, behind the scenes of that work, and talk a little bit about gear. And like I said in the intro, this video is somewhat of a sequel to one of the first videos I did, talking about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K with the Weebill S. Now, if you remember in my original video, I did really like the Weebill, but there were some issues because you had to use counterweights to use most lenses on the Pocket 4K, and there was no control over the Pocket 4K, so you couldn't control the focus and you couldn't control pretty much any of the settings. So the problem with that was when you're using lenses such as this 25mm, where it's pretty electronic, pretty small, you couldn't control the focus, and this lens happens to work pretty well with the gimbal. If you notice, I actually don't have any counterweights on the gimbal at all. This is all perfectly balanced without needing counterweights with this lens on there, which any lens smaller than this, you don't need counterweights either, but any lens larger than this and you start needing counterweights. And I just do not like the footage that this gimbal produces when you have to use counterweights with it. It's not the end of the world, but I notice there's a little bit of side-to-side wobble even if you're perfectly balanced. But when you don't use the counterweights, the footage comes out amazing. So let's get into the meat and bones of this video. So this update for the Weebill S was introduced where you can actually fully control the camera and the focus without having to use the external image app that Zhiyun made for the gimbal. You actually just plug the camera straight into the gimbal and you can control the focus, you can control the ISO and the shutter speed through the internal menus of the Weebill S. Before you needed the image app, now you don't, which is great because the image app added some bulk. You needed to use the HDMI. The battery life of the camera didn't last nearly as long when having to use the HDMI. So it was great that they changed it to where you could just use it via, the gimbal itself. The only thing that hasn't really worked for me so far, which isn't a deal breaker, is when you're scrolling through the different settings. The ISO works great. The shutter is hit and miss. For the most part, it works, but sometimes it doesn't. What doesn't work, though, is the aperture. So you have to change or close down the aperture manually on the camera. And once you do that, you can actually open up the aperture via the gimbal, but you can't actually close down the aperture, which is a weird quirk, and I'm sure it'll get updated in a future firmware update. But just as of right now, really the only usable settings is shutter speed, ISO, but most importantly, the follow focus works. So it works great. The only thing I would say is for live focus pulling, I wouldn't necessarily use it if you're trying to do live focus pull moves, because the way it works on here, it's almost like it has steps, kind of like an aperture does or an f-stop does on a camera, where it's like a click, click, click type ordeal. And I actually don't mind that because really the focus on here is more for me going and setting up the shot easily without having to touch it right here. I can just set up the shot here and move around. You could technically do focus pulls. I'm a little bit of a gear snob when it comes to that, but my personal opinion, I would use this to set up the shot and then roll with it, and then you could readjust it as you need to. But the experiments that I've done, I have tested using this with speed boosted lenses as well. Again, the reason I just didn't continue to use them is all of those needed counterweights on this gimbal, and I just don't like the way the footage came out with that. But with native glass, like this 25mm 1.7, the follow focus is a lot smoother than using it with speed boosted glass. I only tested the Ultra and the XL speed booster. I did not test out the Viltrox, so I do not know if it works on the Viltrox or not. But at least on the speed boosters it does, and with native glass for the most part it seems to work. Other than that, this has been like a new life for my Zhiyun Weebill S because I wasn't really using it that much just because I didn't like having to use the counterweights and I couldn't fully control the camera. So the cameras that I did have to use with it, like the Lumix G7, GH5. When I use those cameras, I could put much heavier setups on there, but I much rather have used my Pocket 4K. Now that I could use it, it pretty much gave even the camera a new life because I can go out and I don't mind using this 25mm lens. I think the field of view is perfect for a lot of gimbal work. It's not too telephoto, not too wide. I think it's just the perfect angle. You could obviously go wider. I also think another really good lens for this setup would actually probably be the 14mm 2.5 from Lumix. I think that lens would, with just a little bit of a wider focal length, I think it would be perfect on this as like a Pocket 4K lens combo gimbal camera. That would work great. But again, the 25mm works great. I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with the depth of field I'm getting. I can get some really cool product shots by using this setup, and I couldn't be happier. And that's really the short parts of this video. This video, again, is a sequel or really an update to the original video I did because a lot of people were watching the video and noticeably upset because they're like, hey, you know, you're talking about using it with Blackmagic cameras. And I really spoke about it more with using my original Pocket Cinema camera than the 4K just because I didn't like that you couldn't use it and the weight distribution was uneven and the footage just wasn't up to par. But now you can control this electronically and the footage is great with this lens, and since I can control it, it makes this setup a lot more valuable. So it is a lot more recommended now 7 months later than when I first got it. It's a shame it took, 6-7 months to happen, but at least it happened. So thank you, Zhiyun, for doing this update and not having to use the image app like you originally announced. I really appreciate it. I really love this setup now, and it's going to be kind of traveling this way with me a lot. Also, coming up next, I may try to put a red Komodo on the Weebill S as well. There's obviously no camera controls for the red Komodo. I don't know if there ever will be, but I saw Jared Land posted on Red User that he was testing the Weebill S and with the Komodo, and it was interesting. So I'm interested to test it out too. So when I can do that, I will put it up on the channel. But for now, I wanted to do this video with the Pocket 4K because obviously it's fully usable. It's a great, powerful camera for the money. So this setup right here is a very powerful gimbal setup for not a very high cost. So again, that was the goal of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or things I didn't go over, I know it was very generic in this video, please put them down in the comments below and I'll get to them as I see them. And until next time, if you guys got good information out of this video, you guys liked what you saw, please hit that like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And until next time, my name's Geoff Fagien, and I'll see you guys in the next video.